Started. My name is Becca. I'll be, sorry, I'm getting a call. I will be sort of hosting this live event. I've been with Price Labs for about 2 years now, but I'm definitely not the most interesting person on the call today. Maybe Richie, Anurag, do you want to maybe go through and introduce yourselves?
Sure. I can start. Yeah. My name's Richie. I'm one of the co-founders at Price Labs, and Becca's lying. She is easily one of the most interesting and most useful person for everyone, for every one of our customers. Becca leads our solutions team in at Price Labs, and so she knows more about Price Labs than most of others on the call today. But I'll pass it on to maybe Anurag and then Pedro and others to introduce.
Of course. Hey everyone, this is Anurag, one of the co-founders at Price Labs. I'll echo what Richie said. Becca is lying. Yes. I handle data science and product, which basically means figuring out how to improve our algorithms, how to make sure they're top notch, and everything else that goes with it.
Cool. Yes, my name is Pedro. I'm in the data science team, and yeah, I work on making sure we have the right data and also making sure that the data is used in good ways, right, to come up with price recommendations. But that's what it. Yeah.
Pete, you want to say hi? No. We've got Pete and who else is here answering questions? We've got a couple of members answering questions as they're coming in. But again, we've got a lot to cover today. So I think our founders are going to start us off with a little bit of a note just to talk about how great this release is and how much work has really gone into it. It's really just been incredible to watch from my end and everything. So Anurag or Richie, you want to start us off?
Yes, I think there is a little bit of an issue though before I get started. I and I think someone on the Matthew did highlight this that we have like a setting which requires people to sign in to Zoom. So firstly, apologies for that. We'll make sure that that setting doesn't exist in future where it requires you to sign into Zoom to be able to join this webinar. So apologies for that. But yeah, we have a lot of people on this call, and so let me get started on this, right? Very excited and like indebted to everyone in the ecosystem. This release that we're going to go through today, and you've probably seen this already, marks a big step change for us in and what you'd expect from Price Labs. The major crux of this release and the major focus on this webinar that we'd focus on is the new pricing algorithm, HLP. This is something that is not very transparent, so it's not like a customization that you can quickly see, right? But this is something that we've been spending nearly or we have spent nearly past 2 years on, and we've gone a significant overhaul also as a company in the past 2 years. We've moved from 30 people to nearly 150 people, and a lot of market shifts. All of you are very familiar with how the market has changed. Now, as we went through designing for this algorithm, there were a lot of changes that we did in our data processing, in how we look at comp sets and how we work on our algorithms, right? Everything that we did made us work faster and will make us work faster to innovate and improve products for you, right? As an offshoot of the project of HLP was, for example, booking curves that you may have used, which is a part of portfolio analytics, right? While I'm spending time on HLP, I also want to say that there are 20 plus new features that have come up as a part of this release, and many of those that we'd be diving in today. Most of these tools, our intention is to provide you with intelligence, right? Provide you with workflows that help you automate things that you're doing, and also provide you with analytical tools so that you can understand your market and intervene quickly. Today, we have about 150 people who are dedicatedly working on making products and services for you. And as we go through this year and next year, we also have on the platform that we're building on HLP and some of the other stuff, we'd be having more incredible releases coming through. But having said that, all of this is not possible without the feedback and everything that you guys bring to us. So I'm extremely thankful for everyone who's joined in today. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the love. And with that, I would like Anurag and Pedro to get started with HLP.
All right. Sounds good. So Richie covered this briefly. Hyperlocal Pulse is sort of the big thing that we have been working on for the last 2 years almost. Like if you can move to the next slide. Before we go into Hyperlocal Pulse, I want to spend a little bit time on like, okay, why did it have to be now? Why did we even have to do this major shift? So PriceLab started in 2014, and a lot, like we built a machine learning algorithm back then, rolled out in Chicago. A few months later, we rolled out sort of a more global model to say, okay, anybody anywhere around the world should be able to use PriceLabs. We got a lot of feedback to say, hey, look, just having an algorithm isn't enough. We need to be able to customize this algorithm because everybody has different needs. So it took us a while. It took us 2 years to then say, okay, like let's come up with an algorithm where it's a little bit clearer. It's not a black box. And say what's the next version where customers can truly, and larger property managers can truly say, okay, this serves my revenue management needs, not just dynamic pricing. It's not turn on and not be able to interact with it. After that, it has been an incredible journey of saying, okay, a constant user feedback, like Richie said, right? To say, okay, what works well, what doesn't work well, where can we improve? A lot of times we added customizations to say, okay, we'll add this customization so that property managers who have a specific property type or in a specific market can be served better. Or we added more to the algorithm to say, okay, how can we improve our event detection? How can we improve our holiday detection? Post-COVID, when history was not a good indicator of future anymore, we said, okay, how can we introduce pacing to our algorithm in a much better way so that the algorithm changes over time, right? The price recommendations change over time. But like every technology, almost like 9 years now is a long time. A lot of shifts happen. Technology moves at such a pace that we got to a place where we said, hey, we collect so much more data now that we should be able to build. If we were to build an algorithm today, we would do a lot better than what we already have. So like, how can we get there? That's where the initiative for Hyperlocal Pulse started about 2 years back. And then it has been a long 2 years is a long time for any industry, but it has been a lot of testing, a lot of feedback from a lot of our early beta customers, all of which has helped us get in here. One of the key things that we observe as a result is just improved RevPAR, and then we'll talk about that in the upcoming slides as well. I wanted to encapsulate exactly what is different from our previous algorithm to our new algorithm. Our previous algorithm was very good. That's the reason everybody on this call is probably using PriceLabs, right? And it identified very clearly what things need to be done at a hyperlocal level, and what things are okay doing at a broader level. So, for example, holidays, events, day of week. We identified very early in our journey that these things are very neighborhood dependent. If you are in the downtown of a city, you get business demand. Your weekend versus weekday premiums may not to be as high. Whereas if you are on in more a touristy part of the city, weekends is your bread and butter. You don't get that business demand. So that's the reason we said, okay, no matter what, we want to make sure from very early on that these top 3 are captured at a very hyperlocal level. Seasonality and pacing, we said, okay, broadly at a region level, these do a good enough job. And these are very computationally heavy models. Like seasonality and pacing are, if you ask any data scientist, it takes a ton to get those right. And so we did those at a cluster level. But like I said, computational power data availability, a lot of things were so much better in the last 2 years. We have invested a lot in our data infrastructure that we said, hey, we should be able to do all of this at a hyperlocal level. And then that's the shift. Everything now is being done for wherever your property is, the closest properties around you that are similar in size. So if you're a 3-bedroom versus a 6-bedroom, your seasonality might be different. Larger homes tend to be more seasonal than smaller homes. Smaller homes tend to also see business demand during low season, whereas larger homes tend to be mostly for vacation, right? A lot of these nuances come up that the new algorithm is just able to capture a lot better. The end result of all of this is essentially, actually, before we go to the end result, I talked about this already, but in this example that just came up, because if you go to the map, I talked about this in depth already, but again, this is showing that example, you know, like where you are in the city, that's on the, if you look at the map on the top right, there is that orangish area, the hexagons, which show, okay, that's the downtown area, versus the blue area at the bottom right is more of a beach area, and how the seasonality can be very different. Now, the old way, we would create 2 clusters for these 2 locations to say the beach area gets one kind of seasonality, the city gets one kind of seasonality. But you will see that there are a lot of short-term rentals all the way in the middle. We have to make a decision, or we had to make a decision. Do they fall in the beach one? Do they go into the city one, the old town one? And what we have done now is to say, okay, it doesn't have to be either or, it can be a continuum. If you are somewhere in the middle and your market behaves like it is somewhere in the middle, then your seasonality is going to be like it's somewhere in the middle, right? And that's the main crux of what we have improved. So you can get to the next slide again. Cool. Yeah, and the end result is essentially improved seasonality, improved day-of-week fluctuations, holiday and event pricing. On every single front, there has been an improvement. And the final outcome is, if you were doing more of set and forget kind of pricing, then it will be just improved RevPAR, improved revenue for you, right? And if you were doing, if you were a very savvy customer who was like very heavily involved, you were customizing our algorithm a lot, what this means is that you'll have to do fewer manual interventions. So like, which saves everybody time, right? So we think of any time we build something, like we want to say, is it going to improve our customers' revenues? And is it going to save customers time? And for different customers, the answer can be different. And again, it can be somewhere in the middle, but that's what we are seeing with the new algorithm. The last thing I want to address before I hand it over to Pedro is, because now everything is being done at a hyperlocal level, there is significantly more transparency in our product. I'm hoping everybody who uses Price Labs has been to the neighborhood data tab, because it is one of the coolest parts of the entire product. I feel you get so much insight into how is your market doing, how is it doing compared to last year, is it slower, is it faster? Like a lot of things, when you have one property, or if you have 100 properties, things that you observe in your portfolio, you can project and say, like, is this because I'm doing something wrong, or is this because the market is doing worse, or is it doing because I'm doing better, or is it because the market is doing better? But all of this data that you see here is exactly what is powering your dynamic pricing now. So earlier, where we had cluster level information that you couldn't see in the product, now everything that powers your dynamic pricing with HLP is going to be present here. So you can anytime go and say, okay, my prices are showing up higher for some weekend in March. Let me see what's happening in my neighborhood. Is something going on? Is it pacing higher than last year? What happened last year on this weekend, and things like that. With that in mind, and this is a good place to hand it over to Pedro, because he's going to get a lot more into what data you see here and how that powers our new algorithm.
All right, sounds good. I guess, yeah, like Anurag was saying, like talking about transparency, right? We'll go over here a little bit into how the algorithm works, right, under the hood. and that will give us some insight into why we designed this thing the way we did, right? So I'm starting here by talking about occupancy, right? Even though what we really care about is prices, right? But it'll get to a point where you'll understand that. I mean, obviously the two are heavily connected, but it will get more obvious as I go through the presentation. But let's talk. This is the beginning of the algorithm, and to begin doing this price recommendation, we need to know how the prices will be in the future. So in the charts here, we have like two charts. Top chart is talking about pacing. So in solid red, we have what is the pacing for this year, right? For future dates. And then in gray, we have what was the pacing during the same time period last year. And then on the bottom chart, we're talking about what was the final occupancy for the dates in the future last year. So we're talking about history on the second chart. All right, so the intuition here is that those are the two pieces of information that are really critical to us, right? And then using those pieces of information, how can we come up with a final occupancy forecast for this year? So looking at pacing, right, on the top chart, there are some areas where it becomes kind of clear what type of insight we're looking for. So I highlighted those areas in green with the green arrows. So we see there that for those dates, the pacing last year was lower than the pacing this year, right? So you can think that like, hey, last year during the same time period, we were about 40% booked in August. This year, for some dates, we're like above 60%. So we can safely assume that the final occupancy for those dates will be much higher than last year. And then, but pacing is really good, but it doesn't tell us the whole story because, as you can see, far out, we don't get a lot of signal for pacing, right? A lot of information. We do get some information, right? And we use it when we can. But if we're really, really far out, bookings haven't started to come in yet. And so there isn't a lot of information about how the bookings will look just by looking at pacing. But the good thing is that we do have a lot of historical data. So we use data from past years to kind of give us that insight. So if we go to the next slide, on the second chart, we're now overlaying a solid green line, which is the forecast that we have for this year. So kind of bringing it all together, right? So and you'll see in the solid green chart where those insights are coming from, both from pacing and from the forecast, right? So on close-in dates, you'll see in August, for example, where those two peaks were in the solid red line up top, they're still showing up in the solid green line, which is our final forecast because, yeah, like we said, we expect those days to have a higher occupancy than last year. But far out, you'll see that the dotted line, which is last year's occupancy, is closely following the solid green line, which means that we're taking the future occupancy, last year's final occupancy, heavily into account when calculating that. There are certain adjustments that we have to make sure that that we have a good occupancy for certain events, right? So, for example, Easter is an event that has really high demand for certain areas every year, but it moves from year over year, right? It's not always in the same dates. So for every single event or every repeating event in the world, like every holiday type of event, we have a mapping that shows us what were the dates for those events last year and what are the dates for the events this year, so that we can properly account for them in our model. So this is all I have for this yearly forecast. So we can go to the next chart. So again, another chart, but this one is important too. So when we talk about forecasts, the last chart we're talking about like, hey, in a broad sense, right? How are we forecasting for the whole year? Now we're going to dig into a single date. So we look at forecasts on a date level, right? Because dates have they progress. The occupancy progresses differently for every single date in your calendar. So that's what we're talking about. So in the first chart, we're kind of seeing where you can think about it as the trajectory of occupancy over time, right? So we're starting 300 days out, right? When the date is almost a year out, very unlikely to be booked, right? Occupancy is 0 for that date. And then you move along the axis there and you go 200 days out, 100 days out, and the occupancy starts to build until today, right? Which is about 50 days out. And then after today, we don't know what the occupancy is going to end up like, but we can forecast it, and that's the dotted line. So on the chart on the right, we kept the same chart, but now I overlaid some information that we used to come up with the forecast, which are dates that already happened in the past, right? And so for what we do is we pick a few dates in the past that we think will kind of have the same type of trajectory as this date that we want to forecast, and those dates are shown in the chart as the black and gray line. So we have 3 of those there. And based on those, as a combination of those, we find what we think the trajectory will be for this date today, right? So that's very important for us. So we go to the next chart. And yeah, okay, so we talked a lot about occupancy, but what we really care is prices, right? And where is the connection there? And the connection is this curve here, which is the price elasticity curve, right? So it's literally for us, right? The curve that connects price and occupancy. So now we all did all that work. We know how to find occupancy. Now we calculate this curve, and then we find prices. And this curve is really unique because it's calculated for every single like hyperlocal neighborhood, right, that Anurag was talking about in the world, for every single date. So different dates have different like booking curves, right? And so each of them has a different price elasticity curve, right? Different relationship between prices and occupancy. So we run this process like hundreds of times every time that you calculate any prices, and this is just one of them. So what this curve is telling us, right, is what will be the odds of booking any night at any price point, and or for one specific night. And so if you go to the price 0, right, on the x-axis, you'll see that the probability of booking is very high, right? It's the highest. And what that tells us is like, hey, if you set your price to 0, everyone will book it and everyone will stay in your house and you'll make no revenue, right? So yeah, that kind of highlights a point that I think is important, where we're not trying to optimize for occupancy, right? Optimizing for occupancy is very easy. You just set your price at 0. Optimizing for revenue is what we really want. So if you move along that line, increasing prices, you'll see that the probability of booking goes down and down and down, right? So you could set your prices at 500, for example, and you'll get no bookings. It'll be the same revenue as if you had set your price at 0, right? So there is some optimal point between 500 and 0, which will give you the optimal revenue, and that's really what we're looking for. You can see that there are certain areas of the chart that are kind of like flatter than others, right? And we kind of take those into account when we're kind of thinking about this optimization problem, right? It doesn't matter if your prices are like 300 or 400, right? Your probability of booking is around 0. But if you're around the sweet spot where the market is, which is like 150, then it does make a lot of difference to pick 150 or 100, right? Price. Okay, now we can go to the next chart, and it's just an overlaid version of this chart. So this is what I was talking about, right? In terms of revenue. Now, not just the probability of booking is there, expected revenue is there too, right? And that's what we really care for. So you can see that when we're talking about revenue, it does matter. Like there is a high point in the curve, right? The black line is the revenue line. And so when we talk about revenue is price times probability of getting booked, what we want to be is at the peak of that curve. And that's what our algorithm is doing. And so we run this algorithm for every single night in the year. We find what's the price that we think will give you the highest revenue, and then we set that price for you. So that's really the algorithm in a nutshell. All right, cool. We can go to the next slide, and I think that's my last slide. And yeah, so I don't know. I already said this, but I'll just go through the whole thing again really quickly. So this is everything that we're doing in a really summarized form, right? We're getting that hyperlocal data based on a location and also similarity in terms of listings, right? Same number of bedrooms, that kind of thing. So that's the first step, update booking data. Then with that booking data, using both history and future data, we do forecasted occupancy, right, for you. So for every single date, we find what we think will be the final forecast occupancy. Then we build a price elasticity curve that gives us the relationship between occupancy and prices. And then we get your prices. And then we run that for every single calendar date in the year, every time that you do a save refresh. And that, in general, that's about 540 days, right? In price labs, that's our default. But it can be a little bit different for each person, but that's kind of what we do. And then, yeah, that's it. I'll pass it along to Anurag again.
Yeah, there was one important point I wanted to cover that Pedro has spoken a lot about already, and that is like how things evolve over time, right? So the forecast is not something that's static. With every passing day, we get new information about the future. And with that new information, we are able to update the forecast. And that is captured in this example where like we went back to 2022 and said, hey, how would a forecast for April 2023 have evolved over time? A particular day in April 2023, which you probably see why I picked that example. But the forecast started out low, bumped up a little bit. Maybe the pacing was high. And then as some of the economic slowdowns started showing up in slower pacing, the forecast was tending down. And then in November, Taylor Swift announced her concerts for the spring, and Phoenix had a concert on April 14th. And soon after, we started seeing like the pace pick up, and that resulted in our forecast jumping up pretty significantly, right? So with every passing day, as more bookings come in, as the speed of booking changes, all of that gets taken into account to say, okay, how do we update this? So like the forecast is not something static; it is constantly updating, which is one of the outstanding parts of this new algorithm. The last thing I want to cover is, and I think there have been questions on this already. Is this already live? And how can I get to start using this? So the answers are twofold. Yes, this is already live. But we do also recognize that a lot of our customers have fine-tuned our previous algorithm to their needs by using certain customizations, by using certain settings. And switching over may not just be a flip of a switch and now you're on the new algorithm. In a lot of cases, it is. And for those cases, we are going to do the switch for you, and we'll inform you that, hey, you're now running on the new algorithm. Every newer customers who join from now on are already on the new algorithm because they didn't have to go through the switch. But we have also built this migration tool to help you migrate. So for example, when you switch over, to evaluate how are my new prices going to look compared to my old prices. Because in a lot of cases, we are finding that if you had day of week pricing adjustments on, or if you had any seasonal based prices turned on, you may not need those because the new algorithm is capturing those in a lot better way. So we are going to help you quickly visualize how your prices look before, how your prices will look with the new algorithm, so that you can fine tune or remove some of the settings that you may not need to remove. Over the next 2 months, we will be reaching out to every customer to say when their account might be ready. But if you want to move over sooner, do reach out to us. We'll be happy to accommodate that as well. And you can reach out to us on support@pricelabs.co, the standard way.
Thank you. Thank you both for going through and really digging deep into the guts. I think it's really great that we're being so transparent and really trying to make the, what's actually going into it, the data accessible for everybody here. Because I know a lot of this can be like very complicated. And again, if y'all have any questions, please use the Q&A. Anurag did a great job. Pedro did a great job really sort of dumbing it down for us, I think, a little bit. They're keeping it high level, but it's pretty understandable. But if you do have any questions, please, we are here standing by to answer them. But there's actually a lot more to our fall release than just the hyperlocal pulse. Some of it is tied to the new algorithm. Other stuff, we've been sort of listening to feedback, listening to what our users are asking for. So we're really excited to actually talk about a couple of these other features that we have released. So I think Richie's going to kick us off with a couple of the first features.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Let me see. Cool. Thank you so much, Becca. So like Becca said, we have 4 additional highlights and then 20 plus highlights. So this is, we'll try to rush through a little bit here, but we have help articles for each of these in coming days. We'll also be making videos available for each of these. But if you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out and do ask questions. We have a couple of folks who are constantly answering Q&A. So there's a Q&A at the bottom of your screen that you can use to ask questions. I'm going to use 2 slides here and then going to jump into the product. Number 1 is performance metrics. If you're familiar with performance metrics on PriceLabs' dashboard, or sometimes we've referred to them as listing health, you in the past could see 3 columns of occupancy metrics on your PriceLabs' dashboard or on the multi-calendar. We have taken that and we've kind of put that on steroids in some ways, right? Now there are like innumerable ways of you to cut and look at that data. the intent is fairly simple. While the HLP part of this webinar was focused on making sure that we are intelligently calculating your prices and automating that, we all know that there are sometimes circumstances, whether that's restrictions that you have from owners, or whether that's maybe there are times when our algorithm's not doing a great job. Maybe there's something else happening with the property, right? There are times when you want to look at properties, but in the past you could only look via occupancy as a metric. This now we've taken it kind of on steroids, and I'm going to show it to you on the product, but that will allow you to quickly look at multiple different metrics, sort them, filter them, and work through price labs faster. Number two, what we have done is we have introduced a desktop app. Now, the reason for introducing desktop app, and I know there's probably a follow-up question of very quickly, is there a mobile app? There is no mobile app right now, but it is planned for in future, right? We don't have dates on it yet, but we will plan for a mobile app. The reason for introducing desktop app is particularly for our large users. If you had a bunch of listings, right? Especially if you had 40, 50 or more listings, we needed to send a lot of data back and forth. And also sometimes you may be in between work, and like trying to log into Price Labs every time could be a little bit cumbersome or tiring, right? And also we were sharing the CPU space with the browser, which limited how fast we could work, right? So introducing this desktop app makes us run faster. And so you should see performance improvements if you access Price Labs' desktop app. Let me now jump and show both of these to you quickly in Price Labs, if I can find my account. Cool. So if you'd see my account, let me hop back on out here. Firstly, let me cover the desktop app piece. As you can see, I don't know if you can see the bottom bar on my screen, but I have like a Price Labs logo. So I'm seeing quizzical looks. So clearly you can't see the bottom bar. So if you see, maybe now you can see the bottom bar. If you do see if not still, but you'd see basically I have a Price Labs app downloaded on my screen. The way you can download Price Labs on your computer is because I've downloaded, I don't see it anymore. But here you'd see an option to download Price Labs app, right? So that's where you'd see an option to download Price Labs app. Let me quickly find a screenshot on this for you. Or I'll come back to this. And then the next update that I wanted to talk to you about was the performance metrics of it, which is the scores of performance metrics that we have added, which you can easily access when you log into Price Labs on your pricing dashboard, but also on multi-calendar. On pricing dashboard, what you would see is at the top right side, you'd see this add new metrics or add metrics, a new kind of a tab. And if you're looking at my screen, you'd be familiar with seeing, hey, occupancy 15 days, occupancy 30 days, and maybe another column. But I have added some new metrics. I've added revenue past 30 days, revenue next 30 days. I had made some money in the past month, but I've not made money in the next 30 days. Of course, these are dummy listings. I've also added, hey, recommended Price Labs base price to minimum price. And as you would see, if I clicked on it, all of this is sortable, right? Now, how do you add this? If you go to select metrics, let me remove the ones that I have. We do recommend adding at least 3. But if I looked at this, I can now choose from occupancy, and I can choose year to date, past 90 days, various filters in the past, or various filters in the future. Same with revenue. I could do the same, RevPAR, ADR, minimum price, right? How many of my rates are hitting my minimum price threshold? Sometimes our minimum prices are set too high, and so it will very easily give you that idea. Recommended base price to base price ratio. What Price Labs is recommending your base price to be versus what your current base price is. That can give you a quick idea of, hey, I need to go in and tweak some base prices, right? Last book date, you sometimes just want to know when was the last time this property got a booking, because it might look all rosy and your occupancy metrics look great, but maybe you have not received any booking in the last couple of months, right? Booking pickup, again, for you to be able to see how many bookings have you gotten. And then market penetration index, this is similar to occupancy, if you see here, we used to show occupancy and then your listings occupancy and market occupancy. That's what market penetration index is doing. It's dividing your occupancy by market occupancy so that you know, are you ahead of the market, behind market, etc. very quickly. Now, there's a lot of definition that each of these metrics have and how they're calculated. If you click this Learn More button, let me X out of all of this. If I was again here, if I click Learn More button, it will quickly take me to these metrics and their definitions. I've added some. I'm going to remove all of these and just quickly show you. Let me say I want to add minimum price hitting 21 days, and I also want to add a metric which is, let's say, my last book date, right? And those are the only four metrics that I want to look at. I'll update and change, and you'll see the dashboard in the backend change to reflect this change. Yeah. And give it a second to load. And now you'd see, of course, this is dummy account, so ignore the zeros, right? But you'd see, hey, I have 38% of the days that were hitting minimum price, and my last book date was 26 July 2023. So you can start seeing some of these metrics. Like I mentioned, you can sort them. If you start adding a bunch of columns, this table can get extremely messy. What you can also do is quickly come to row column visibility. And you can choose to remove columns that you don't want to see, right? I don't want to see bedroom count. I kind of already know that. I know my cities. Maybe I want to see my groups, and I don't want to know base price, last sync. Yes, I want to know. And then I can choose any of these, right? So that way I can quickly access listings that or make my dashboard cleaner. And then finally, like I said, this is sortable, but what you can also do, and if you've not used our filters, these filters are powerful, but now we've taken, again, those, you could previously just use them with listing info metadata. Now you can also use them by metrics. So for example, if I want to look at, listing with occupancy, or actually not occupancy, let me say revenue in the past 90 days, greater than 100, and it will filter that for me, and it will show me just those properties, right? On top of that, what I can then do is I can save. So it'll only show me this property which had the revenue, right? I can, if I have created this filter and I like this filter, I can save this filter so that I can easily access them next time, right? Similarly, you can access the same thing in multi-calendar view. When you're in multi-calendar, you'd see the same. If you've created anything on your pricing dashboard, the same things will show up on your multi-calendar automatically. So occupancy 15 days, minimum price, last book date. But again, I can change this and select it in any way. And then the row column filter that I've shown you, it exists here on the left-hand side. So you can select whatever column you want to see on multi-calendar. Cool. So those are the two updates. Portfolio, this performance metrics, which is on steroids, it will hopefully help you run through price labs as your. This is not something that you need for onboarding use case, but in an ongoing use case, as you're evaluating your performance, evaluating which listings to take action on, it will help you filter and run through listings faster. And then the second one, which I can't show you, but if you don't have a Price Labs account downloaded, if you click on the settings thingy at the right top, you'll see an ability to download Price Labs app if you're using it on Chrome or any kind of Chromium browser. Right, it's not on Safari. We don't have an ability to download app, but if you have just install Chrome browser and if you have Chrome browser, access it once, and your Price Labs app will be downloaded, and then you'd have the app on your screen. Cool. With that, Becca, I will move back to our PowerPoint, and if you want to take us through the next two set of.
No, of course, yeah. Cool. So, okay, perfect. Here we go. So, one thing that we're trying to do is make the tools more accessible. Not only make the data more accessible, but actually make your user experience even, better than it's been in the past. And something, if if you've used Price Labs before, you know that we have a ton of customizations, and that's because we're catering to not only short-term rentals, but midterm rentals, hotels, apartment hotels, things like that, multi-units.